So right now, the Afterneath module is just processing all the sounds. So we've got a kind of complex patch with some drums, some cymbals, some bass, and some other, a couple other synth lines. And everything is just being processed right now. So if we take this back, boom. Here's the completely dry signal here. And we'll fade down some of the other voices. I'm going to walk us through with this little kick because I think it demonstrates all of the features really well. A nice sound with a quick attack and a short decay will allow the different features of the reverb to kind of show, especially some of the more subtle ones like the tone and diffuse control. So real quick. So, okay, the Afterneath is our otherworldly reverberator. We've had it as a guitar pedal since 2014. It's now on to the third version. And the Afterneath module is our first synthesizer module, which is for the Eurorack system, and it is based on the Afterneath V3. What it does is it takes a cluster of short delays and smears them around to make kind of reverb-like sounds. So that's a big ambient machine, can do a lot of cool stuff. So it's a reverb, but it's also kind of delay. It can also be an oscillator. It can do lots of things, and even though it's technically mono, we can actually do stereo stuff with it. I know that's the biggest thing. Everyone say, why would they make something that's not stereo? Hey, it's modular. We like to, if we want a stereo, we can make it stereo. But, you know, there's a lot of stereo modules coming out these days, but this has been in the works for a long, long time. So we feel it stands on its own. So, yeah. Like I said, there's feedback. There's an analog feedback path, which is the reflect, and a digital decay, which is the length. So let's start doing some stuff here. So we're gonna pull up the mix. Again, the mix control does not go 100% wet. This is fully wet with the mix control, but we do have a dry kill switch engaged. So if you want to patch in, mix it in, which we'll show some stuff later, where you mix it back into your mixer, or different patching ways to patch it that you can get kind of different stereo signals and mix it all in so you get the exact mix of wet and dry that you want. But for simplicity's sake, it does all right here. It gets plenty wet for us, we believe. Again, the input here, control number 1, is a real wide range, so you can plug instrument level signals. We make guitar pedals, so we made sure that this was a really wide range input, so it will overdrive and distort the signal. So it is common to have it kind of between 9 and 1 for a lot of times, so something right here sounds pretty good where it's not really distorted. So the dampen control tone is tone. So, oh yeah, beautiful hands, here we go. Woo! The control number 2 is dampen. This is a low pass filter to non-resonant, and this is just on the wet signal. So this is darker to clockwise and counterclockwise brighter. Very simple and subtle, but it affects everything in the different delay lines. So it does a lot more within the system. So when it's self-oscillating, it controls the wave shape of the oscillation, so, and other stuff. So, and it's kind of a key part of the circuit. So even though it's very subtle, and when you're using a long, kind of droning signal or something with a long decay, it may be hard to hear. But again, with this kick, really easy to hear. All right. So control number 3, this is our reflect, which again controls the regeneration of the reverb. It's an analog feedback path, which is why we have the reflect, send, and return, because you can put stuff in it, do all sorts of cool things. Again, you're gonna go counterclockwise for no regeneration, and then start turning it up for more regeneration, and it will self-oscillate. Now, what point it self-oscillates interacts with both the length and the drag control. So depending on if you have the length set up, it's going to self-oscillate sooner than if you have the length all the way down. Exactly. So those two controls interact with each other. With the length all the way down, the reflect all the way up. This is kind of what you do. And then again, when you adjust the drag, you'll hear that. But we'll get more to the drag later. Yeah. So just real quick, I know we've already touched on the mix control, but again, it controls the amount of dry signal that's mixed with the wet signal. So, and remember, kill switch for fully wet. Yes, reflect is feedback. It's analog feedback path. Exactly what it is. So, all right. So again, we already talked about the dry kill switch here. Let's go to the drag. So this digital reverb is made of a bunch of short delays. The drag separates the delay lines, creating stuttering, pingy effects. Kind of the most fun control in the Afterneath, and is what kind of made it fun in the guitar pedal world. And then of course we give you CV control over that, which was kind of one of the big things. We'll just real quick add a little LFO. Just a little CV control of the drag, just a little bit, a tease for later. All right. So when you're modulating this, the notes will kind of ring out and warp, and you'll get warp speed effect. It's another kind of like delay-like effect when you turn it counterclockwise. It kind of stretches everything apart. You can kind of feel. You can hear all the individual delay lines. Yep, this is the time control on a delay. Exactly. The Afterneath is both a delay and a reverb. Yeah, you can do some cool granular-like sounding stuff. It's not exactly granular, but it can get sounds that are kind of similar. All right, the mode. This is kind of a new control that's on the Afterneath as well module, as well as the version 3 pedal. And what this does is it controls the behavior of the drag, as well as how it responds to control voltage. There's 9 different modes, and we'll kind of touch briefly on them. But essentially, they're different quantized modes. The first modes are unquantized, so it affects both the knob and the CV. So this is kind of the normal response that the Afterneath has always had. This is the unquantized mode. All right, and so we go now. The LED will let you know when you're in the next mode. It is a smooth pot on there, so it's not clicked, but you'll know you're in the next mode with the LED changes. Yeah. So the second one, this is unquantized, but it has a little bit of slew. So if you send a kind of kind of a quicker signal to it, like from our LFO, let's see, here we go. This is just a square wave we're sending into it, but you can hear it's got a little bit of slew. Yeah. And then mode 3 is unquantized. It is 1 volt per octave. So the Afterneath controls do track 1 volt per octave, though you do have to do some interesting scaling when you're using it as an oscillator. So it's not meant as a precision oscillator, but does track 1 volt per octave, which is very useful when using some of the later modes that use octaves and fifths. So here, just plug our. I have a dope for ribbon controller here, so we can plug that in here. All right. It does work better when I have a pitch signal. And I'm just going to touch through real quick with the rest of the modes, because they're just different quantizations. So we've got 4 is the chromatic scale. And then we've got 5 is your major, and 6 is your minor. And then 7 is your pentatonic scale. So the bass sound that you're hearing is coming from the IntelliGel Rubicon, and the kick is coming from the WMD Crater. And I'm using the Dope for Ribbon controller. Ooh. To control the drag control, which is, we're using quantized modes here. The last few modes, octaves and fifths, and then we have just octaves. It can be a little bit jarring. And then let's see, we're going to send that to our trusty LFO. And now that's just octaves. I personally like octaves and fifths. Gives a little bit more resolution. So those are the different modes. Again, there's a lot to play with there, but we'll kind of keep moving on because the module can kind of suck you into all the different. Yes, it's a pitched reverb, and when it self-oscillates, which we're going to do right now, take the length and reflect up. The mix acts as our volume, and now that we're self-oscillating, because it can go really crazy. I just have an LFO controlling that, but let's go back to our Dope for Ribbon controller. Not the most interesting, but, the dampen will control the tone of the self-oscillation. It does need some sort of input, but it doesn't need a continued input. Like if we cut it, we just need at least one blip to get it going. There is no internal sounds. But now that we have everything going, then we'll switch to, again, Josh is saying you don't need an input source, so maybe it will self-oscillate, but it's much easier to get things going if you've got the sound source. Let it take off. And again, we just I think it technically will eventually self-oscillate, but let's try, let's see. I've always used a blip. Josh is also a EQD wizard, so if he says it can self-oscillate on its own, then it probably can. But the easiest way to get it to self-oscillate quickly is to put a signal into it, turn the length and reflect up, and then adjust your mix to make sure it's not clipping. But again, we have no processing on the Afterneath right now. This is just direct. There's no reverb, there's no... And again, it's a little bit unpredictable, so you can kind of adjust all the different parameters and get kind of different tones. Yeah, so let's talk about the reflect, send, and return real quick. So again, this you can input signals into the analog feedback path. A couple things. So the reflect return is just another input. So we could technically plug, another sound source directly in there, and you can, and then the volume then becomes the reflect. So let's just plug in another square wave here into the reflect return. And then the reflect control becomes the volume for that. And that's going directly into the reverb, so it is going to be wet. It's only going to be wet, but it will mix it into the reverb. Yeah. And the reflect send, you can then send out to something else to process, like a filter. I have let's see here, the WASP filter is fun, so let's do that. So audio input into the WASP. Let's bring our kick back. Yeah. And then we've got it into our dope for WASP. And then again, you can hear the filter. So that is the dope for WASP in the reflect and return. And again, you can dial in the levels to make sure it doesn't clip. But there's all sorts of different things you can put in there. Another thing I like to put it in is the Modcan dual frequency shifter right down here. So we'll do this here. All right, so we'll take the reflect send out, and then we'll go into the input of the dual frequency shifter, output, and we'll send it back here. And then, yeah. And then adding a little LFO control to now we have an LFO controlling dual frequency shifter, which is in the feedback, reflect and return of the Josh, you're taking away all my rest of my talking points. Reflect is acts as the volume in for the reflect return. So we want more of the frequency shifter, turn up the reflect control. All right, so speaking, because Josh already mentioned it, we're going to show how to do in the pseudo-stereo mode. And this will kind of be the last patch, because I know there's other things going on. We're going to have a quick second that there's going to be no sound. Let's get it, because we just had a little mono patch going. So let's get a stereo patch going. And I'm using the WMD performance mixer going into my Pittsburgh outs, which I've had forever. Ooh, signal. Then we're going to take the effects send, go into the input, and then we're going to patch. We're going to hit the dry kill switch, because again we're going to be mixing it back in, so we don't need the dry. So we have two. We'll have two wet only signals, which is the output is the normal, and then the reflect send. Now, because it's a different point in the circuit, there is stereo separation. So bring this up, the mix and controls. Here we go. There we go. Had the inputs and the outputs mixed up. There we go. It's the fun of streaming though. So we have, again, the output, the mono output of my performance mixer. This is the effects send, which I'm currently using in the post mode. So it's post fader. And then we have the reflect send going to the right input and the output going into the left. And again, we're set. We have the dry kill switch engaged, so we're fully wet. Let's add a little bit of length. And slow it down. This is how you get to the stereo, pseudo-stereo, because again, it's a mono input, but stereo out, but it's wet only. But we mix that back in because we're in modular land. The reason why it can is, again, it has to do with different points in the circuit, so it does have a different phase and different length, everything, because the way that the circuit, again, I'm not the designer, so I can't go into the specific details, but essentially it has different amounts of processing on it, so there's different lengths, different phase, decay, all that stuff is slightly different, and that's what gives it a nice stereo separation. Let's fade in the rest of this patch. So yeah, that's the end of my walkthrough. Again, apologize for all the technical difficulties. We'll take a quick break and then we'll be back here at 4. Thanks for watching. All right, welcome back, everybody. Here we go. If you can hear the kick this time, let me know. I know we had some issues with the first stream. They couldn't hear the synths. All right. Sweet. Well, if you're just joining us for the first time, I'm going to be showing us some cool patch tips and tricks, and really I'm just going to jam with the Afterneath module because we kind of did a more in-depth walkthrough earlier today. We had a few problems with getting the stream up, but now we're good. If anyone's joining us for the first time, the Afterneath is our otherworldly reverberator. And way we do this is we take a bunch of small, short delays and we cluster them together and have all these different delay lines that we can kind of smear and manipulate. So it's a delay that makes up a reverb. So again, it's a bunch of short delays, but it has both controls of a reverb and controls of a delay. So we're gonna do some cool stuff. So we got a very different patch going here. So let's bring it up. I'm using the WMD Crater and Crucible. And then for the snare sound, we're using the Make Noise Telharmonic. Yeah. So we got a little, and then we're gonna have the fade in the Rubicon. Now let's add in some Afterneath. Alright, so I'm going to be using our pseudo-stereo trick here, which is what we do is we take a mono input signal and then we get a stereo wet image out. So we have the dry kill switch enabled, and I'm going to send the effects send of my WMD performance mixer, the input here, woo, and then we're going to have the output go into the left return, and then we're going to have the flex send go into the right return. So now we've got some kind of more control. And I'm sending everything post fader, so as I adjust the levels on the performance mixer, let's get a little. So as I adjust it, I can send more into the reverb. So we can do this kind of dub style. Channel 1 is the kick. Channel 2 is our cymbal, which we can adjust. Channel 3 is our snare. And 4 is our little bass. Back up to the Afterneath. We're going to add in some CV control over the Afterneath module. So we'll take an LFO. Triangle LFO that's running pretty slow, and we're going to pump that into the drag right now. One thing to note, these are bipolar attenuators. Some people call them attenuverters. And again, nothing is right around noon. Inverted is counterclockwise, and clockwise is positive. And you can kind of dial that in. The Afterneaths can be a little bit picky about voltage ranges, so it's key to kind of dial that in. If you turn the attenuators all the way clockwise or counterclockwise, you'll probably have some missing range, or it might be doing some funky stuff. So depending on the signal. So you'll want to tune that in. Now another cool thing we can do is right now we're in the first mode, which is just unquantized, which the drag control just kind of moves again smoothly throughout the range. This is similar to your time control on a delay. I mean, it is, but we're using it for other purposes. Now the mode is quantized, so if we set quantization, you can hear the LFO is no longer smoothly sweeping. It is now kind of adjusting. Hey there, Christopher. What's going on, George? So the one thing that's also cool is we can CV control the mode. So if sometimes we like it being quantized and sometimes we don't. So we'll set it up to the LFO as well. We'll set it so it sweeps through different quantizations here. Goes from a little more interesting symbol, adjusting some CV into the decay of the crucible. Here's completely dry. Thanks for watching. So the next thing we can do is we can CV the length. So this is our digital decay. So let's go, we'll start with a really short decay and then we'll add some LFO. Again, sometimes it could be, here we go. I'm gonna remove the drag in the mode right now so you can kind of hear the length. Removed all the CV, so let's go and add some fun stuff here. Back. Adjust the input, give it a little more signal. Again, you can clip it, so you want to be a little ginger with it. little bit clip in there. So right now you can hear the diffuse is set all the way counterclockwise. So there's no diffuse. You can hear all the individual delay lines. You can hear how much smoother that is. Well, let's CV it. You can hear, again, it can be subtle, but you can adjust with the range, make sure everything is kind of doing what you want it to do. You can also invert it here. Dampen again, this controls the tone, so we'll give it a little brighter, and we'll give it a little more reflect here. Then we'll add back in the CV control of the length. I'm using a bipolar signal, so I want to pull the length up a little bit. And then you're like, but Karl, we haven't been messing with the drag. Let's save the best for last. I'm going to use my Dope for a 198 ribbon controller to control the drag. It's my favorite thing to do. Here we go. Adjust our range here. And that's just unquantized, but we can set it to my favorite setting, octaves and fifths. Now let's make this self-oscillate. Turn the length to reflect up. like the reflect to have this self-oscillation stop. Kind of dial things back to clear out the buffer, because again, you can. And right now, I have that kind of synth line not going through the effects end, but I've got the different drum parts, the kick, the cymbals, and the snare. Be kind of dubby with it. So we'll take out the stereo part, and we'll just do it in mono. And we'll use the reflect, send, and return to go into our dual frequency shifter. One of my favorite destinations. The reflect controls that acts as a mix for the reflect return. And that cool phasing kind of sound you're hearing is the frequency shifter in the feedback path. Because again, turn the reflect, goes away. Takes a minute because again, it's still in the buffer. And then of course we can CV the dual frequency shifter. Now we have just an LFO triangle wave. Still have the ribbon controller hooked up. And all the ribbon controller is doing is controlling the drag, which is the time of the delay. Just is controlling the clock. It is still quantized to octaves and fifths. Let's make it unquantized. Turn up a little bit of length. Now if we break the connection here, take out the reflect, send, and return, we remove the dual frequency shifter, we can just, the reflect path will start feedbacking it again if it's too, the control's turned up too much. But now we can use the reflect return as an input into the delay line, into the reverb, the effect core, and the reflect knob becomes our kind of mix level. So I'm going to take the E350 Morphing Terrarium, and we're going to run that through a wave multiplier over A137. into the VCA because we want to have a little more control over this. So we have the morphing terrarium going directly in to the feedback path. It's going right into the reflect return. And then we're just morphing the Z. Turn up the mix a little bit. Let's kick it into high gear. A much shorter length with the diffuse turned all the way off, so you hear all the more pinginess. Ribbon controller still hooked up to the drag though. love the transmitter, but it's not coming back. The Afterneath has a lot of its charm, and in the modular world, we can put all sorts of cool filters on it that can do a lot of the similar stuff. I do love it though. You could probably find one on Reverb. All right, well, that's all for today. Again, thanks for joining our live stream and checking out the Afterneath Eurorack Module from EarthQuaker devices. Again, it's our first module, so if you're liking what you're hearing, go pick it up. I know that the sponsors, Synth City, got them in stock. They're a lot of fun. And again, if you want to learn more, you can go to our YouTube page where we have our Afterneath video manual, which is 18 minutes, goes in depth, even more in depth than I went in earlier. And you'll hear yours truly giving you the walk down in the smooth, sultry voice. We've also got some other great demos from people like David Scott Scone, Vice Cooler, Basic, Steffi Duckula, all awesome heavy hitters. So hope you enjoyed this little stream. And if you don't have any other questions, then I'm gonna tune out. So thanks again.